Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Pivotcast. I'm your host, Sarah the Pivoter, and I'm coming at you live from Neil the Armstrong van here on Santa Barbara Beach. And I've got an amazing guest for us today. Here on the Pivotcast, I interview super rad humans from around the world doing epic things in all walks of life. This is a platform to share their voice and bring their story to you. In this episode of the Pivotcast, we're going to hear from Yonason Goldson. He's a rabbi that hitchhikes and is on TikTok. How rad is that? I'd say that's super rad. I stumbled across this fascinating rabbi on LinkedIn, and with a name like the Ethics Ninja and Hitchhiking Rabbi, I simply had to reach out. We got on a Zoom and we're fast friends. We talked for over an hour, and I knew I had to get him on an episode of the Pivotcast. So, in today's episode, we'll be talking about ethics as the foundation of a civil society, being a strategic advantage in business, and the basis for all relationships in life. Yonason will also share his wisdom and life experiences as we delve into discussing purpose and personal growth being the key to genuine happiness. He's the director of ethical imperatives and works with business leaders to create a culture of ethics, setting higher standards to earn loyalty and trust. He's a keynote and TEDx speaker, rabbinic scholar, and repentant hitchhiker in St. Louis. He's published hundreds of articles applying ancient wisdom to the challenges of the modern world in 6 books, most recently Grappling with the Gray, an ethical handbook for personal success and business prosperity. For those of you who have caught me on the Pivotcast before, I'm sure you can see exactly why I had to have him on the show today. He's also the co-host of the weekly podcast, The Rabbi and the Shrink, Everyday Ethics Unscripted, and the publisher of the new medium blog, The Ethics Ninja. So, without further ado, let me bring our guest on today. Yonason, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, Sarah. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything that I just read out for you, but I'd love to have you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how you came up with this amazing name, the Ethical Ninja and Hitchhiking Rabbi.
Well, I should clarify that I no longer hitchhike. I was my hitchhiking days preceded my becoming a rabbi, so I hope that's not misrepresentative in any way. But it was actually the hitchhiking that led me to become a rabbi. I graduated from the University of California with a degree in English, and what does one do with a degree in English? I went hitchhiking cross country. Did that for about half a year, crossed the Atlantic, went backpacking across Europe, ended up in Israel on my way to Africa and Asia and Australia, but never made it past that point because I really not reconnected, but connected with my Jewish roots, which I really knew nothing about before. And I discovered this vibrant society of deep thought and higher purpose and community. Ended up living in Israel for 9 years. Met my wife, had our first 2 children, and then embarked on a career teaching high school students. I wanted to impart to them the wisdom and the sense of purpose and direction and focus in life that I had discovered. Taught for 1 year in Budapest, Hungary, 2 years in Atlanta, Georgia, and 20 years in St. Louis, where I live now. And when I retired from teaching, I wanted to continue to communicate the values and the sense of higher purpose that has guided my life, but I wanted to put it into a professional context. So I started a speaking business, working with business leaders and professionals to establish a culture of ethics that leads to success. And I focused on that topic because when I looked at the universal principles and teachings of Judaism, 2 of the most fundamental and foundational values we have are, the Hebrew term is derech eretz, which literally means the way of the land. And it means having an awareness of how our actions affect the world that we live in. And in our Western society, we talk all about our rights. In Jewish tradition, we talk all about our responsibilities. And really, rights cannot exist without responsibilities. Because if I'm demanding my rights and you're demanding yours, we're going to be bumping into each other all the time. But if I'm looking out for your rights, taking responsibility for my role as a functioning and contributing member of society, and you're taking responsibility for my rights, we're going to get along all the time. And the other idea is really going beyond the letter of the law, although the nuance is a little different. It really means when we talk about reading between the lines, what is the intent of the law? What does the law want from us? And that's why in business, people talk about compliance. It's a good start, but ethics begins where compliance ends, because we
Mm,
have to intuit what are those laws meant to contribute to a healthy work environment. And so there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of shifting our weight, as it were, shifting our perspective. And that's why I came on the concept of the ethics ninja, because what is a ninja? It's a person who has a mission, and he works in the shadows, and he
mm.
has to shift his weight and be ready to anticipate the unexpected. And that's why I call my book Grappling with the Gray, because that's really what we do. We grapple with our gray matter, we grapple with the gray areas of life, and that's the thumbnail of who I am and what I do.
I absolutely love that. There are so many gems in there. And I'd like to touch on, the values and finding that purpose. And so, may I ask, what was it on your hitchhiking travels that had you start to question and go deeper into your Jewish roots and then, eventually decide to becoming a rabbi? Was there a pivotal moment, if you will, or was it just a series and a culmination of experiences?
I think it was a long series of events. I talk about it in some deal in my TED talk. Um, but one of the things that I found while I was hitchhiking is that many of the drivers who picked me up wanted someone to listen,
Mm,
and that was how I paid for my rides, by listening to people tell their stories, because we're familiar with this strangers on a train principle. We'll disclose things to people we know we're never going to see again. And certainly a hitchhiker picked up on the side of the road, dropped off at the side of the road, never going to cross paths again. And people told me on more than one occasion that things I'm telling you, I've never told my wife, my children, my best friends. And I realized that we have these stories, we have these secrets, and we want to be able to share them. It just doesn't feel safe to do that.
yeah.
And so to create a culture, to contribute to a culture where we have connections that we trust, that we feel safe, we have a common sense of mission, common sense of purpose, we feel connected to each other. The irony of the age we live in, call it the age of connectivity, because it's easier than ever to connect, and yet we're less connected than we've ever been, because there are all these layers of distance between us. Um, and so when I got to Israel, and I wandered into a religious seminary through a whole series of unlikely uh, uh, coincidences, um, I discovered that there really was a commitment to seeing the world in a more truthful way,
Mm,
and to developing ourselves to become the best versions of our own selves as individuals and as a community.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I love that you've been able to take these concepts and bring them into the business world because, as you said, the ethics comes in after compliance ends. And many people grumble about compliance, right? And they complain and they don't really understand the deeper meaning, as you said, the nuance of why those rules exist. And so it becomes a box tick exercise. And, people are not understanding or taking responsibility for how their actions impact others, impact the organization, impact our planet. And that's pretty much why we find ourselves in the situation that we have now, isn't it? Because we are taking actions without thinking through what comes place after that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're focused on, whether it's immediate gratification in terms of pleasure, or immediate payoff in terms of short-term successes, short-term best benchmarks, quarterly earnings reports. Imagine that you have a long-range project that's going to take you a couple of years to implement, but you're not going to see that payoff, and your managers and your bosses or your shareholders or your investors, they want to see, what's the bottom line? When is this going to pay off? Wow, show me that this is already profitable. And so we can end up sabotaging our long-term success by focusing on short-term gains. And we do it in business, we do it in our personal lives. And so part of being ethical is context. It's seeing the big picture. It's recognizing that we have to make decisions that are going to lead us to a destination that is well thought out. The path is well thought out. And if we try to get there faster, we may end up not getting there at all.
Mm. Yeah, I think that I believe it's the Marines who use the phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so we oftentimes try to cut corners or speed up the process, and we might trip in the process of doing that, and find ourselves really injured and hurt. And so then it takes longer to heal from that and then continue or, really painfully pivot into another direction.
And we
And
may cause a lot of damage along the way as well, as
oh,
you can
absolutely.
actually,
Right? The collateral damage.
yeah.
What would you say for an individual, right? Because what's kind of coming in my mind is, Don Miguel Ruiz, be impeccable with your word. What would you say at the individual level, the ethics, like how can someone bring that into their day-to-day life?
Well, it starts with core values. And that's something that not everybody has thought about. What are my core values? And stay away from catchwords. I just published an article this morning, the danger of slogans. You hear them all the time, and they're almost always political in some sense. And I don't even want to start getting into them because I'll alienate half or all the people who are listening. But it's fine to be able to have a label that represents an idea, but when we start worshiping the labels, and this is another topic of my TED Talk, is that we put labels on other people, we put labels on ourselves, and we think it's going to make life simpler and easier. We won't have to make this effort to get to know people, but really the labels prevent us from knowing others and from knowing ourselves. Something becomes a cliche. Why does it become a cliche? Because it's true. And yet, when we resort to cliche, then we really aren't thinking about what it means anymore.
Right.
We're really just falling into this reflex, and that prevents us from thinking deeply about what are our core values. What do these labels and these catchwords actually mean? And how do we go about creating a world where those values are really part of the society we live in? Well, it really starts with me. Yeah. I have to live up to those values. I have to have honesty and integrity. I have to have empathy and humility. I've created an acronym based on the word ethics of 6 qualities that define an ethical person or an ethical leader. The E is empathy. The T is trustworthiness. The H is humility. The I is inquisitiveness. We have to be curious and always want to learn. The C is courage, because it can be difficult to do the right thing. And the S is self-discipline, because it's not a checklist, it's a process. And we have to keep working on it and keep strengthening ourselves. And that's how we develop into more and more ethical people, where we have that courage to do what's right. We have that empathy that allows us to be aware of the impact our actions have on others. We have that humility that we don't think we're better than other people, and the inquisitiveness that we don't think we know enough. And that's often a problem. Right?
Yes.
There's this cartoon I saw years ago that I just love. It was this CEO says to his assistant, "I hate yes men. Don't you agree, Perkins?"
Yeah.
We should surround ourselves with people who challenge us, because
Absolutely.
that's how we learn and that's how we grow.
And yet what we find is most people, they don't like to be challenged because it's facing the mirror that they may not want to look in at the moment, right? Maybe they're not yet ready, or as you said, they've put a label around themselves. So it's creating this judgment, and a term I'm sure you've come across is spiritual bypassing, right? A lot of people, they learn, they grow, they they evolve their thinking, but then they pendulum swing the other way, and then they start to judge the others who are not there yet, forgetting that they were once on the other side or not yet at this stage of the journey. And so it's that where that empathy comes in, the nuance, and being able to allow people to be at different stages. They don't have to be right where you are. And
Yeah. They say
that
if
allows us
you're
to be more honest with ourselves, then we can be more honest with other people as well.
right, and it's all about challenging ourselves, setting higher standards. Somebody said, I don't remember who said this. I should find out. If you're the smartest person in the room, find another room.
Yeah, you're in
Mhm.
the wrong room.
Yeah, it feels good
Of course.
to feel like I know more than those around me, and I've reached a level that places me at the top. But it's a dangerous place to be. When you they say
Absolutely.
when you're on the top, there's only one direction you can go. Uh,
Yep.
when you surround yourself with people who are more than you, who challenge you, who I mean, they're not going to want you in their company unless you rise to the occasion,
Absolutely.
unless you earn the privilege of being with them, and seek out people that challenge me to be more than I am.
Mm.
Now, you pose the question that this can be, in practical terms, very difficult at times. If I'm in a job, if I'm in a work in environment, if I'm in a social community where the people around me are not holding themselves to the standards to which I aspire, that can pull me down, that can set me apart, that can isolate me, that can make me a lightning rod, because people get very uncomfortable around people who call on them actively or passively to up their game.
Yes.
But, do you want to spend your life in the minor leagues making $1,000 a month, or do you want to go into the majors and really play with the big boys? Um,
Yeah, absolutely. There's been someone watching us live that was talking about they never aligned or really liked or aligned with labels, and that there's a lot of power in speaking your truth. And I think when people start to realize that, then they realize that the labels are just another box, right? We oftentimes give ourselves a label or identify with something to remove ourselves from one box, but we end up just putting ourselves in another one. And as you said, if we are surrounded by people who will try to bring us down, right, tall poppy syndrome or the crab in the bucket syndrome, then it can be really a lot of effort to grow. But if we're around people who inspire us and encourage us to do the thing that's right, even when it's hard or when we have no idea what the result is, just to know that we're supported in that endeavor. And as you said, I've certainly lived in a lifestyle where I put myself in a box and conformed to make everyone else around me comfortable. And it was one of the most painful and uncomfortable and lonely experiences that I ever had. And yet I put myself there. And I think a lot of people do that until they realize that there's another way. And it usually takes having a mentor or someone who shines the light on the path that they previously just couldn't see, or maybe it was too dark and they were afraid to go down on their own.
yeah, and that's a really good point you make there at the end, that finding a mentor or mentors,
Mm.
and very often, if you seek out people and you demonstrate to them that you want to learn from their wisdom, they will often be very receptive, because people who are worthy of our admiration, they feel a sense of responsibility, a sense of indebtedness. Now we call paying it forward. They've benefited from others, and they feel an obligation to allow others to benefit from them.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we're here on this podcast right now, right? I saw something in your profile that really pulled me in, that I felt like I could learn from and connect to, and you responded, right? And you saw that, and we were able to connect through that. And so I think when we go into roles like teaching, at a high school level or school level, or we're in a community service type of environment, we also get that opportunity to stay curious and to continue to learn as the same time, right? We're all kind of going on that evolution and ascension together rather than alone, right? And just like, oh, I know more. You're over there. It's let's do this together.
Yeah, and if there's a silver lining to COVID, it's that we have now the technology has become popular for connecting with people all over the world.
Yes.
And, it was there before, but we weren't really as reliant upon it or as comfortable with it as we have become. And I mean, I'm really quite grateful for the connections I've made in the last 2 or 3 years with people that are really quality people and really worth engaging. And it's sometimes just as easy as sending a message
Yeah.
and saying, I saw you on LinkedIn, I saw you on your website, I saw you heard you on a podcast, and I'd really like to connect. And very often people are more than grateful, more than gracious, more than willing to make those connections.
Absolutely. And this is something that I've taught a lot of my clients and a lot of employees when I worked in corporate on how to connect with people. What it used to be LinkedIn, because I was talking in the professional context, but any platform, as you said. And now we have an opportunity to create those connections rather than just wait for, let me see who I run into at the community center, or let me, at the coffee shop, kind of meet somebody there. It's we can actively go out and seek these connections and create them and learn from them. It may only be a connection that you'd have one time, but it could be something that you needed to hear that message. It was something that helps pivot your life into a new direction. And that's at your fingertips. And I agree with you that we didn't really take advantage of it before, whereas now more people are open and we're connecting, all over the globe.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, I think, that when you reach out to people, don't reach out just as a taker.
Yes.
Reach out as a partner. I mean, we've all gotten those spammy messages trying to sell us things before we've even spoken, but some are even more, in some ways, disturbing. Connect with somebody on LinkedIn, and then I'll get a message that says, "How you doing?" There's nothing really compelling about that.
No.
But if someone says, "I read an article that you wrote, and I really liked this point," or
Yes.
"you reminded me of another article, maybe you'd be interested in this link." And there's no sales pitch, there's no self-interest. It's just, I think there's a common interest here, and I'm reaching out to share that with you.
Yes.
It makes it very worthwhile to want to respond in a positive way.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, it's the intentionality, right? You read an article and you're connecting about a specific point. And then that's what connects. I mean, human beings connect by story. And so when we can find that connection point, that's that anchor for the relationship. And from there, you never know where that relationship goes. It could turn into a partnership, it can turn into a collaboration, just a great friendship, right? There are so many different opportunities there if we take ourselves out of those boxes and those labels and we just allow ourselves to connect for the sake of connecting.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll find that people that you might never have considered engaging with, or people coming from points of view that are very different from your own, you can strike up and develop really meaningful relationships. And those are the types of things that help bridge the distances, whether it's religion or ethnicity or lifestyle identities. And there's the focus today on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's an increasing body of research that shows that it's making us more divided than ever.
Mm.
And it's not because those concepts are wrong. It's that our whole approach is often misguided, that we're so focused on asserting our own identities that we're doing it in a way that drives other people away from us
Yeah.
rather than bringing us all together.
Yes. And I think at the end of the day, we all crave that community. We all crave the connection. And Western civilization has really, championed the individual who can do it all and who can, have all the things in the house and the car. And yet this person is so busy and overworked and burnt out that they don't enjoy any of these things. There's nobody to share it with. And so it all becomes meaningless and hollow. And it's not until they connect to their values. And as you said before, many don't even know what they are, or they have a blanket like, oh, it's family or it's work, and I say that's rubbish when they tell me that. Let's dig a little bit deeper. And I'm sure you've experienced the same thing in some of the people that you've worked with.
Yeah. And when you're just spending all your time with people who are just like you, it might be comfortable
Mm.
because again, there's no challenge, there's no threat. And if I don't really know my values and I haven't really thought through my sense of self, then I might be very uncomfortable around people who are different because they force me to reevaluate myself in a way that I haven't before.
Yeah.
But when I'm willing to do that, the level of self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-confidence that comes out of that is something that can't be achieved in any other way. And I broaden my perspective and I see the humanity in those around me, and we find common ground, and we don't see that there are reasons to be adversarial. When you go back to the idea of ethics, it's a mindset. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of looking at other people. It's a way of looking at myself. And I'm taking responsibility to develop myself into the person who's going to make the greatest possible contribution to the world in a positive way.
I love that. I think so many people, we've got someone live saying that they're always forever a student. And I think that's the best mindset. Again, the curiosity. It's applying that to any situation, including when maybe there's confrontation or a disagreement. If you're simply curious about, well, why does the person have the worldview of this way? What experiences have they gone through that shaped them to think that this is the only path, or that this is their mindset. And I think from that point we can remove those walls or break them down a little bit so we can peek over, right, and connect, rather than just having this blanket in front of us that prevents us from truly seeing eye to eye, because we all want the same things at the end of the day. And a lot of religion says the same thing in different ways, and yet we have people fighting over, no, it's my story, it's this way is the way, right? But at the end of the day, it's really just about the connection and having the ethics and having that personal responsibility to growth. And I think that if people can commit to that, they can commit to themselves, then they can become this ninja, right? And they can work through their own shadows, and bring this to light in their own life, in their business. I'm sure you've seen a few major pivots and transformations, both at individual and corporate level, in the work that you do.
Yeah. And, the Hebrew word shalom, which is usually translated as peace, translates more accurately as harmony.
Mm.
And what is harmony? Harmony is different voices, different tones, different components, all blending together into a new unity. And when we say that we become greater than the sum of our parts. That's another one of those cliches that really warrants thinking about. Because what does it mean we're greater than the sum of our parts? It means we're now supporting and reinforcing each other, and we're making one another better. And we're making one another complete. And it's only because of those differences. They say if you have two partners and they're doing the same thing, or they're good at the same thing, one of them's unnecessary.
Yes.
But
You
when we
need these.
complement each other, then that's when we really can see tremendous success.
Yeah, I love that. It made me just think as you were speaking of a wheel, right, and the spokes of a wheel, and how we need multiple spokes in order to come to that center and be able to turn and move forward. If we only had one, or they were all angled the same way, then there would be no movement, right? And we wouldn't be able to support. Maybe we turn and then just get stuck, right? And so I think that's a really important point, is that we need each other at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when you look, as you just did, you take something as simple as the design of a wheel. When you observe the world we live in, the lessons are everywhere.
Mm.
They're absolutely everywhere. You just have to be looking for them.
Yeah, just be open to receiving them, right? Yeah, beautiful. Well, Yonason, I feel like we could continue this conversation for hours, but we will have to wrap up. So, may I ask, where's the best place for the listeners to get in contact with you? I'll make sure we put all the links and everything in the comment section of the video, because it will be posted on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook.
Well, you can go to my website, which is my name, Yonason Goldson, Yonason, Goldson.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so connect with me there. And I've also started an online community, and you can find out about that at Grappling with the Gray, which is gwtg.live.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom. I know I've certainly appreciated it, and I think a lot of people will get a lot of value from today's interview. And I'm sure we'll bring you on for another topic very soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks,
Okay.
Sarah.
Thank you.